Alright, today we are going to change the brakes and the rotors on a 2005 Porsche Cayenne Turbo SUV. It's a beautiful car, has huge brakes. They're really heavy and they're real expensive. A lot cheaper to do it yourself than to get Porsche to do it. So we're going to do it. I'll just narrate over the top of this since I'm going to blast my music while I do this. Here are the brake pads for the front. Big, hefty ones. The rotors for the front. There's my hand just to show you how big these are. Big and thick. Cross-drilled and slotted. Rear pads with the warning sensors. And again, big, huge, thick rear pads. Since this has the air suspension, we need to put it in safety mode before we jack it, or else the airbags are gonna poof, 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 poof on the suspension. So you just take this and pull it forward until it says regulation switched off. Now we can switch it off, and it'll stay off until we roll with it a little bit. First, we need to jack it up. Once it's starting to lift off the floor, loosen the lug nuts. If you don't, the wheel will spin once it's off the floor, and you can't get any leverage to break them free. Now lift the tire off of the floor so it can rotate and take the lug nuts off. I wish I had a lift, but there's no room in the garage right now. Put the tire aside. You'll need this later. I put a jack stand under the suspension and lower it to spread the weight of the car out over the jack and the stand. Safety first. These are pretty cool looking calipers when they're clean. So I'll clean them with my Neither cleaner, which is just some dish soap and water in a spray bottle. So here are the calipers and the pads and how they are attached to each other and the car. There's a bolt that goes through a spring retention plate. The wear sensors go on both sides of the pads, then the harness snakes through the caliper on the side, then through the bleed screw cover and into the connector. To get the rotor off, we need to take the caliper off. First, the pads need to go. Loosen the bolt on the inside. Some versions I've seen have a cotter pin here that retains the bolt, but mine has a retention bolt screwed in there. Then pound the retaining bolt out with a screwdriver. It's under tension from the retention spring and the tight fitment. Now the wear sensor needs to come off. The wire is held in place by a clamp on the retention spring. That comes off. Then it goes through the side of the caliper. So I used some pliers to squeeze the pistons back into the caliper to be able to take the pads out. I knew that I was changing the pads and rotors this time, so I ran those pads until the metal was almost scraping the rotors. Here's the bleed screw cover that wraps up the wire from the sensors. It pops off and you can remove the wire. I promise. There it goes. Now the connector. You should be able to push in on the front tab and pull it out. But of course it doesn't want to come out right away, of course. Finally. Now the main bolts. These are torqued to like 200 foot-pounds, which is a lot. So it'll take some doing to get them off. These are one-time use bolts, so get new ones before you start changing your rotors. I used a long breaker bar and still needed a bit of leverage on top of that. Now the front retention bolt on the rotor. It's a star head socket, so you'll need one of those to get it off. Once it's broken loose, it comes right off. Now the rotor should just fall right off, right? Nope. I sprayed it with a lot of not window cleaner and then hit it with a hammer. Then I pried it with a screwdriver. Let me pull the caliper off here a bit and pound again. Put a few lug nuts on so that it wouldn't just fall onto the floor and my toes. On the other side, I just used a big dead weight mallet and hit it on the bottom and it kind of bounced right off. It eventually came off just like the engineers designed it to. I cleaned off the not glass cleaner that I sprayed in there to loosen it up. You don't want any lubricant spinning onto your new rotors, or you won't stop very well. The new rotor gets a good cleaning to get all the manufacturing and shipping junk off of it. And onto the spindle. I put a few lug nuts on there to line it up correctly. Then the retaining bolt goes back in. The caliper gets screwed back on and then the new bolts get tightened to spec. Well, my torque wrench doesn't go up to 200 foot-pounds. So I used the breaker bar and extension to torque it to what I felt when I was taking them off. Click! Click! Some of that grunge is baked on there and won't come off. That's okay, we don't see it, it's hidden in the wheel. Alright, now the new pads. The pistons in the calipers weren't all of the way pushed out, so I put one side of the pad in, then I used the pad and a screwdriver to push on the other pistons. Now the new wear sensors. The thick side goes towards the rotor. They just clip in. The spring retainer goes on, and the long bolt secures it all. Now we can route the wiring for the new wear sensors and clip it into the connector. Time for the tire to be put back on. Only do this part if you actually want to use the car and drive it. Otherwise, you can leave it off. Porsche supplies a neat little screw-in rod that centers the wheel and helps keep it on while you secure the lug nuts. Now I got to get that annoying jack stand out. Oh, come on. Pre-tighten the lug nuts, then lower it until the tire touches the floor. Then you can really tighten them up in a star pattern. Lower the jack and we're done. Throwing it all away. Throwing it all away. Thanks for watching. Next time we'll do the rear brakes and rotors. Stay tuned.